The dust-caked stagecoach rattled to a stop outside the Greeley, Colorado depot, just as the afternoon sun reached its peak. And when the door swung open, every man within eyeshot forgot what he was doing, because the woman who stepped down onto that wooden platform looked like she had traveled through hell itself, clutching a bundle of blue blankets that squirmed and mewled in her trembling arms. Nathan Miller had been loading fence posts onto his wagon when he heard the collective intake of breath from the men gathered near the general store. He straightened, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his hand, his gray eyes narrowing as he took in the scene. The woman was young, maybe 22 or 23, with dark auburn hair that had escaped its pins and hung in tangled waves around her dirt-streaked face. Her dress, once probably a respectable traveling outfit, was torn at the hem and stained with what looked like blood and trail dust. But it was her eyes that caught Nathan's attention, those wide, desperate blue eyes that darted from face to face like a cornered animal looking for either salvation or the quickest route to escape. The baby in her arms let out a wail that cut through the muttering crowd, and the woman's whole body seemed to fold inward protectively. Nathan saw her lips move, saw her speaking to the child in tones too soft for him to hear from 30 feet away, and something in his chest tightened in a way he had not felt since the war ended 7 years ago in 1865. "No husband, from what I hear," said Tom Brewster, the blacksmith who had sidled up next to Nathan's wagon. "Stage driver told Deputy Morris she got on in Denver 3 days ago, alone except for the baby. Paid her fare with a wedding ring." Nathan did not respond. He watched as Martha Henley, the doctor's wife, approached the woman with her usual brisk efficiency. The young mother flinched backward, nearly stumbling off the platform edge before Martha caught her elbow. Words were exchanged, though Nathan could not make them out, and then the woman was shaking her head violently, backing away even as Martha tried to guide her toward the doctor's office across the street. "I do not need charity," the woman's voice suddenly rang out, clear and sharp despite the exhaustion that lined her face. "I need work. I can cook, I can clean, I can sew. I just need work and a place to stay until I get on my feet." The muttering grew louder. Nathan saw the way the other women in town were looking at her, their mouths pursed in disapproval, their eyes calculating and cold. He knew what they were thinking because small towns like Greeley, even in this year of 1872, had long memories and harsh judgments for women who appeared with babies and no wedding bands on their fingers. "What kind of work you think a woman like that can do?" Tom said, his voice heavy with insinuation. "Respectable women do not travel alone with bastard children." Nathan's hand shot out so fast that Tom did not see it coming. He grabbed the blacksmith's shirt collar and yanked him close, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You will watch your mouth when you talk about a woman you do not know anything about, Tom. You understand me?" Tom's eyes went wide, and he nodded quickly. Nathan released him and turned his attention back to the platform. The woman was swaying now, her legs clearly about to give out, and the baby's cries had intensified to the point where even Martha Henley was looking uncertain about what to do next. Nathan made a decision that would change everything. He dropped the fence post he had been holding, dusted off his hands on his worn denim pants, and strode across the street with purpose. The crowd parted for him automatically because Nathan Miller was not a man people crossed lightly. At 6 feet 2 inches of solid muscle earned from years of ranch work, with a reputation for being fair but uncompromising, he commanded a certain respect in Greeley despite being only 26 years old. "Madam," he said, stopping at the base of the platform and looking up at her. "My name is Nathan Miller. I run a cattle ranch about 5 miles north of town. I am in need of a housekeeper if you are truly looking for work." The woman stared at him with those desperate blue eyes, and Nathan saw the war happening behind them, the struggle between pride and necessity, between suspicion and hope. Up close, he could see that she was even younger than he had first thought, and prettier too, despite the exhaustion and fear etched into her features. The baby had quieted somewhat, making snuffling sounds against her shoulder. "I do not need your pity," she said, her voice cracking slightly on the last word. "Good," Nathan replied evenly, "because I am not offering it. I am offering a job. My last housekeeper, Mrs. Patterson, passed away 2 months ago, and my house has been falling apart ever since. I need someone who can cook 3 meals a day, keep the place clean, and help with the garden. In exchange, you get room and board in the guest cabin, plus $30 a month. That is more than fair for this area." Martha Henley made a noise of protest. "Nathan, you cannot just take in some strange woman. You do not know anything about her or where she came from." "That is my business, Martha," Nathan said without taking his eyes off the young mother. "What do you say, madam? You look like you could use a hot meal and a safe place to sleep tonight." The woman's throat worked as she swallowed hard. A tear tracked through the dirt on her cheek, and she wiped it away angrily with the back of her hand. "I have a baby," she said, as if that might change his offer. "He is only 3 months old. He cries at night sometimes. He needs things." "I have ears and eyes, madam. I can see you have a child. Does that change your ability to cook and clean?" "No, but I will need to stop to feed him and change him, and then we will work around it," Nathan said simply. He held out his hand to help her down from the platform. "Come on. You look ready to drop where you stand, and that baby needs to be out of this sun." For a long moment, she just stared at his outstretched hand. Nathan could feel the eyes of the entire town boring into his back, could hear the whispers starting up already. He knew what this would look like, knew the gossip that would spread like wildfire through Greeley before sundown. But he also knew what it was like to be desperate and alone with nowhere to turn, and he would be damned if he stood by and watched this woman collapse in the street, because everyone else was too busy judging her to offer help. Finally, she shifted the baby to one arm and placed her free hand in his. Her fingers were ice cold despite the August heat. Nathan steadied her as she stepped down, and when she swayed against him, he instinctively put his hand on her lower back to keep her upright. "Thank you," she whispered, so quietly he almost missed it. "Can you walk to my wagon, or do you need me to carry you? I can walk." She straightened her spine with visible effort, and Nathan saw the pride and determination that had probably kept her alive through whatever hell she had endured to get here. "I am stronger than I look." "I believe you," Nathan said, and meant it. He guided her through the crowd, which parted reluctantly, whispers following in their wake. Nathan ignored them all, focusing instead on getting the woman and her baby settled in the back of his wagon. He had been hauling fence posts, so the bed was not exactly comfortable, but he spread out his spare blanket and helped her climb up. "What is your name?" he asked as he arranged the blanket so she could lean against the wagon side. "Delilah," she said after a pause. "Delilah Kensington. And this is Samuel." She looked down at the bundle in her arms, and her face softened in a way that made Nathan's chest tighten again. "He is a good baby, truly. He does not mean to be trouble." "No baby means to be trouble," Nathan said. "They just are sometimes. Nothing wrong with that." He paused, then added carefully, "I am not going to ask you questions you do not want to answer, Delilah. Your past is your business, but while you are on my ranch, you and Samuel are under my protection. That means nobody bothers you, nobody judges you, and nobody makes your life harder than it needs to be. Understood?" Delilah's eyes filled with tears again, but she blinked them back furiously. Why are you being kind to me? You do not know me. For all you know, I could be everything those people are thinking I am. Nathan met her gaze steadily. Maybe you are, maybe you are not. But I figure everyone deserves a chance to prove themselves, and I have never been one to judge a person based on gossip and speculation. You need work, I need help. That is all that matters right now. He climbed up onto the wagon seat and took up the reins. As he guided the horses out of town, he could feel Delilah's eyes on his back, could sense the questions she was not asking. Behind them, Greeley's main street buzzed with excited chatter, and Nathan knew that by tomorrow morning, the whole county would be talking about how he had taken in the mysterious woman with the baby and no husband. Let them talk, he thought grimly. He had weathered worse storms than small-town gossip. The ride out to the ranch took about 45 minutes, and Nathan used the time to point out landmarks and explain the layout of his property. He owned 300 acres of prime grazing land along the Powder River, with a main house, a barn, 2 corrals, a smokehouse, and a small guest cabin that Mrs. Patterson had lived in before her death. He ran about 200 head of cattle and employed 2 ranch hands, brothers named Jack and Will Morrison, who lived in the bunkhouse near the barn. Delilah did not say much during the ride, and when Nathan glanced back once, he saw that she had fallen into an exhausted doze, her head lolling against the wagon side, one hand still protectively cradling Samuel against her chest. The baby had also fallen asleep, his tiny face peaceful in a way that made something ache inside Nathan's chest. He had not planned on this, had not planned on any of this. When he had woken up this morning, his biggest concern had been getting those fence posts before the hardware store sold out. Now he was bringing home a woman and child, and his life was about to get a whole lot more complicated. But as he looked back at Delilah's sleeping face, at the way the sunlight caught the auburn highlights in her tangled hair, Nathan found that he did not regret his decision. There was something about her, something beyond the obvious desperation and need, that called to him. Maybe it was the fierce determination he had seen in her eyes when she had insisted she did not need charity. Maybe it was the gentle way she held her child, even in sleep. Or maybe it was just that he recognized a kindred spirit, someone who had been through hell and was still fighting to survive. Whatever it was, Nathan knew with a certainty that settled deep in his bones that this was right. He did not understand it, could not explain it if someone had asked, but he knew it just the same. The ranch came into view as they crested the final hill, and Nathan felt the familiar swell of pride he always experienced when he saw his land spread out before him. The main house was a sturdy 2-story structure built from local timber, with a wide front porch and a stone chimney. The barn was even bigger, red-painted and well-maintained, with a hayloft that could hold enough feed to get his stock through even the harshest Colorado winter. Beyond the barn, the river glinted silver in the afternoon sun, and his cattle dotted the green pastures like brown and white flowers. This was his kingdom, built from nothing over the past 6 years with his own 2 hands and the money he had saved from his time in the war. It was not much compared to some of the big ranches in Wyoming and Montana, but it was his, and he was proud of every acre. The wagon rattled into the yard, and immediately the ranch hands came out of the barn to investigate. Jack and Will Morrison were both in their early 30s, weathered and capable men who had worked for Nathan since the beginning. They approached the wagon with curious expressions that quickly turned to surprise when they saw Delilah in the back. "Boss," Jack said, his eyebrows rising nearly to his hairline, "did not expect you to pick up passengers in town." "Life is full of surprises," Nathan said dryly. He climbed down from the wagon seat and moved to the back. Delilah had woken at the sound of voices, and she was looking around with wide, disoriented eyes. "Welcome to the Triple M Ranch," Nathan said, offering his hand to help her down. "That is Jack and Will Morrison. They work the cattle with me. Gentlemen, this is Delilah Kensington and her son Samuel. She is going to be our new housekeeper." Will let out a low whistle. "Well, I will be damned. About time we got some decent cooking around here again. No offense, boss, but your biscuits could be used as ammunition." Despite everything, Delilah's lips twitched in what might have been the beginning of a smile. She accepted Nathan's hand and climbed down carefully, keeping Samuel secure against her shoulder. The baby had woken up and was making small fussing noises, his tiny face scrunching up in preparation for a full-blown cry. "He is hungry," Delilah said, her cheeks flushing slightly. "I need to feed him soon." "Of course," Nathan said. "Let me show you to the cabin. It is not fancy, but it is clean and private. You can get settled, take care of Samuel, and rest. We can talk about your duties later, after you have had a chance to recover from your journey." He led her across the yard to the small cabin that stood about 50 yards from the main house. It was a simple structure, just one large room with a fireplace at one end, a bed, a table with 2 chairs, and a small dresser. Mrs. Patterson had kept it neat as a pin, and Nathan had not had the heart to disturb her things after she passed. So her quilts still covered the bed, and her dried herbs still hung from the rafters, filling the air with the scent of lavender and sage. "It is not much," Nathan said, pushing open the door and standing back to let Delilah enter first. "But the roof does not leak, the fireplace draws well, and you will have complete privacy. The main house is over there if you need anything, and the privy is just behind those trees." Delilah stood in the doorway, looking around the cabin with an expression Nathan could not quite read. Slowly, she walked inside, her free hand trailing along the back of one of the chairs. She turned in a circle, taking in the bed with its colorful quilts, the clean floor, the sunlight streaming through the window. "It is perfect," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I never expected. I thought maybe a corner of a barn or a room in an attic, but this is." She trailed off, pressing her lips together as if to hold back tears. "Take your time getting settled," Nathan said, suddenly feeling awkward and out of place. "I will have one of the hands bring in some firewood, and I will get you some supplies from the main house. Food, water, whatever you need." "Thank you," Delilah said again. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and Nathan felt the full force of her gratitude and confusion. "I do not understand why you are doing this for me. Nobody does things like this without wanting something in return." Nathan held her gaze. "I want a housekeeper who can cook and clean, that is all. You need work and a safe place for your son. Seems to me that is a fair exchange, nothing more and nothing less." But people in town, they were talking. You had to have heard them. "They think I am—" "I do not care what they think," Nathan interrupted. "And neither should you. You know who you are, and that is all that matters." Delilah stared at him for a long moment, and Nathan saw the walls behind her eyes, the defenses she had built to protect herself from a world that had clearly not been kind to her. He recognized those walls because he had similar ones himself. Samuel chose that moment to let out an indignant wail, and Delilah immediately turned her attention to her son, murmuring soft words of comfort. Nathan took that as his cue to leave. He backed out of the cabin, pulling the door closed behind him, and stood for a moment on the small porch, running his hand through his dark hair. "What have you gotten yourself into, Miller?" he asked himself. But even as the question formed in his mind, he knew he would not change his decision even if he could. Jack and Will were waiting for him by the main house, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and concern. "You want to tell us what is going on, boss?" Jack asked. "Because that woman looks like she has been through a war zone, and I do not think I have ever seen you bring home strays before." "She is not a stray, she is an employee," Nathan said firmly. "And yes, she has clearly been through something difficult. That is exactly why I offered her work. She needs a chance to get back on her feet, and we need someone to cook and keep the house. It works out for everyone." Will exchanged a glance with his brother. "The whole town is going to be talking about this, you know. Woman with a baby and no husband living on your ranch. People are going to assume things." "People can assume whatever they want," Nathan said. "It does not change the facts. Now I need one of you to bring some firewood to the cabin, and I am going to gather some supplies for her. She and the baby need food and water and probably about 100 other things I am not thinking of." Over the next hour, Nathan made multiple trips between the main house and the cabin, bringing blankets, dishes, a basket of food, a pitcher of fresh water from the well, and even some of Mrs. Patterson's old clothes that he thought might fit Delilah. He knocked each time before entering, and each time Delilah called for him to come in with a voice that sounded steadier than before. On his final trip, he found her sitting in one of the chairs by the window, nursing Samuel with a blanket draped modestly over her shoulder. Her hair was still tangled, but she had washed her face and hands, and some of the desperate edge had faded from her eyes. "I brought some clothes that belonged to Mrs. Patterson," Nathan said, setting the bundle on the bed. "She was about your size, I think, and there is bread, cheese, dried meat, some preserves, and coffee in that basket. It should hold you for a few days until you are ready to start cooking in the main house." "You do not have to keep bringing me things," Delilah said quietly. "You have already done so much." "I want you to be comfortable," Nathan said simply. He moved to the fireplace and knelt down to arrange the wood that Will had stacked there earlier. "It gets cold at night, even in August, and you will want a fire. Do you know how to start one?" "Yes," Delilah said. "My father taught me when I was little, before he—" She trailed off, then changed the subject. "Nathan, can I ask you something?" "Sure." He stood, dusting off his hands. "What made you help me today? And please do not just say you needed a housekeeper. You could have hired any number of women in town who do not come with the complications that I bring." Nathan considered his answer carefully. He walked over to the window and looked out at his land, at the mountains rising in the distance, and the river cutting through the valley. "7 years ago, when I came back from the war, I had nothing," he said slowly. "No family left alive, no home to go back to, just the clothes on my back and the pay the army owed me. I was 20 years old and had seen things that no person should ever have to see. I was angry at the world and did not care much if I lived or died." He paused, remembering those dark days. "I ended up in a town in Kansas, drinking myself to death in a saloon when this old rancher named Henry Morgan sat down next to me. He did not lecture me, did not preach. He just bought me a meal, listened to my story, and then offered me a job on his ranch. No questions asked, no judgments passed. He gave me a chance when nobody else would." Nathan turned to look at Delilah. "I worked for Henry for 3 years. He taught me everything about ranching, about cattle, about how to build something from nothing. When he died, he left me a small inheritance that allowed me to buy this land and start my own operation. He saved my life, Delilah. He did not have to, had no reason to, but he did anyway. So when I saw you today, standing in that street looking like I felt 7 years ago, I guess I figured it was my turn to do for someone else what Henry did for me." Delilah's eyes had gone bright with tears. "I am not a drunk soldier," she said softly. "My story is different." "I know," Nathan said. "But desperation looks the same no matter where it comes from. You needed help, I could provide it. That is all there is to it." Samuel had finished nursing and had fallen asleep against Delilah's shoulder. She adjusted the blanket and began gently patting the baby's back, and Nathan found himself mesmerized by the simple domesticity of the scene. He realized with a start that this was the first time in years that his house had felt like more than just a place to sleep between long days of work. "I should let you rest," he said abruptly. "You have had a long journey and you need sleep. We can talk more tomorrow about your duties and getting you settled properly." "Nathan," Delilah said as he reached the door. He turned back. "Thank you, I mean it. You may have just saved my life and Samuel's, whether you realize it or not." "Get some rest, Delilah," Nathan said gently. "Everything will look better after a good night's sleep." He left the cabin and walked back to the main house as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. Jack and Will had already gone to the bunkhouse, and the ranch was settling into its evening quiet. Nathan stood on his porch and looked back at the cabin, where lamplight now glowed golden in the window. By sundown, the whole character of his ranch had changed. This morning, it had been just him and his two ranch hands, living the rough, bachelor existence of men without women to civilize them. Now there was a woman and a baby in the guest cabin, and Nathan found himself thinking about things he had not considered in years. Things like what it might be like to hear a child's laughter on his land, or to come home to a warm meal cooked by soft hands, or to have someone to talk to in the evenings who understood loneliness and survival. As the sun finally dipped below the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Nathan made a silent promise to himself and to Henry Morgan's memory. He would give Delilah Kensington and her son Samuel the same chance that Henry had given him. He would ask no questions about her past, make no judgments about her circumstances, and defend her against anyone who tried to make her life harder than it already was. What he did not realize, as he stood there in the gathering darkness, was that in making that promise, he had just set in motion a series of events that would change both their lives forever. Because sometimes the most important decisions we make are the ones we do not even know we are making, and sometimes the people we save end up saving us right back. The next morning dawned clear and bright, and Nathan was up before the sun as always. He went through his usual routine of checking the stock, repairing a section of fence that had come loose during the night, and helping Jack and Will with the morning feeding. But throughout it all, his mind kept drifting back to the cabin and its occupants. Would Delilah be awake yet? Was the baby doing all right? Did she have everything she needed? He forced himself to wait until a reasonable hour before approaching the cabin. When he finally did, around 8 in the morning, he found Delilah already awake and dressed in one of Mrs. Patterson's calico dresses. She had managed to brush out her hair and pin it up in a simple style, and with the dirt and exhaustion washed away, Nathan could see that she was genuinely beautiful. Not in a flashy, painted way, but in a natural, honest way that made his throat go dry. "Good morning," she said when she opened the door to his knock. "I was hoping you would come by. I wanted to ask when you would like me to start my duties." "How are you feeling?" Nathan asked instead of answering. "Did you and Samuel sleep well? Better than we have in weeks," Delilah admitted. "The bed is comfortable and it is so quiet here. No noise from the street, no people shouting or arguing, just the sound of the river and the wind. It is." She paused, searching for the right word. "Peaceful." "Good," Nathan said. "As for your duties, there is no rush. Take today to settle in, get your bearings. Tomorrow will be soon enough to start." But Delilah shook her head firmly. "No, I want to start today. You have been more than generous, but I need to earn my keep. I need to feel useful again. Please." There was such determination in her voice that Nathan found himself nodding. "All right, if you are sure. The main house is yours to do with as you see fit. Clean it, Organize it, whatever needs doing. I have been living like a bachelor for too long, so I imagine it is pretty rough in there. And if you feel up to cooking dinner tonight, I know Jack and Will would be eternally grateful. They have been surviving on my attempts at food for 2 months now, and it has not been pretty. Delilah actually smiled at that, a real smile that lit up her whole face and made Nathan's heart skip a beat. I promise my cooking is better than ammunition-grade biscuits. What time would you like dinner? 6 o'clock, Nathan suggested. That gives us time to finish the day's work and clean up. 6 o'clock it is, Delilah agreed. And Nathan, I will try not to disappoint you. Something tells me that is not possible, Nathan said, then immediately felt his face heat up as he realized how that sounded. He cleared his throat awkwardly. I mean, I am sure you will do fine. Great, even. I will just go now. Work to do, cattle and fences and such. He beat a hasty retreat, feeling like a fool. Behind him, he thought he heard Delilah laugh softly, but when he glanced back, she had already closed the cabin door. Nathan threw himself into work with more vigor than usual, trying to forget the way Delilah's smile had made him feel. He helped the Morrison brothers move the herd to a fresh pasture, repaired 3 more sections of fence, and spent an hour working with a young horse he was training. By the time 6 o'clock rolled around, he was exhausted, dirty, and starving. He cleaned up at the pump behind the main house, changing into a fresh shirt and doing his best to make himself presentable. Jack and Will had done the same, and the 3 of them approached the main house with a mixture of anticipation and nervousness. The smell hit them before they even opened the door. Fresh bread, roasted meat, something with herbs that made Nathan's stomach growl so loudly that Will laughed. They walked inside to find the house transformed. The floor had been swept and mopped. The windows had been cleaned until they sparkled. The clutter that had accumulated over 2 months had been organized and put away. And the table, which had been covered in papers and tools and various odds and ends, was now set with clean plates and silverware, with a vase of wildflowers in the center. Delilah stood at the stove, wearing an apron over her dress, with Samuel sleeping peacefully in a makeshift cradle she had fashioned out of a laundry basket and some blankets near the fireplace. She turned when she heard them enter, and Nathan saw the nervousness in her eyes. I hope this is all right, she said. I found a roast in the smokehouse and vegetables in the garden, and I made bread and gravy, and there is pie for after if anyone wants it. I was not sure what you all liked, so I just made what I know how to make, and I hope it is enough because Samuel woke up twice while I was cooking and I had to stop to feed him, but I think everything turned out okay anyway. And Delilah, Nathan interrupted gently. Breathe. It smells amazing. You did not have to go to all this trouble on your first day. I wanted to, Delilah said. I wanted to show you that I can do this, that you did not make a mistake bringing me here. I never thought I made a mistake, Nathan said. He pulled out a chair at the table. Now, are you going to join us, or are you going to make us eat alone? Oh, I could not possibly, Delilah began. You could and you will, Nathan said firmly. You cooked this meal, you deserve to enjoy it with us. Besides, I want to make sure you are eating properly. You are too thin, and you need your strength if you are going to keep up with a baby and a ranch house. Delilah hesitated, then nodded. She filled plates for all of them, piling them high with roast beef, potatoes, carrots, and thick slices of fresh bread. When everyone was served, she finally sat down herself, though Nathan noticed she took the smallest portion. The meal was incredible. The beef was tender and flavorful, the vegetables perfectly cooked, and the bread so light and fluffy that Will ate 4 slices before he even touched his meat. They ate mostly in silence at first, too hungry and too appreciative to make conversation, but gradually talk began to flow. Jack told a funny story about a cow that had gotten stuck in the creek. Will complained good-naturedly about the amount of work they still had to do before winter. Nathan found himself relaxing in a way he rarely did, enjoying the simple pleasure of a good meal and easy company. And through it all, he kept stealing glances at Delilah. She was quiet but attentive, listening to their stories with genuine interest, occasionally offering a comment or a question. When Samuel began to fuss in his makeshift cradle, she excused herself to check on him, returning a moment later with the baby in her arms. "I am sorry," she said. "He is usually good during dinner, but he must know we have company." "Here, let me," Nathan said, setting down his fork. Before he could think better of it, he stood and walked over to Delilah. "May I?" Delilah looked startled. "You want to hold him? If you do not mind, I have some experience with babies. My sister had 3 before she passed." Something flickered across Delilah's face, but she carefully transferred Samuel into Nathan's arms. The baby was warm and surprisingly solid, and he looked up at Nathan with big, curious eyes that were the same deep blue as his mother's. "Hey there, little man," Nathan said softly. He supported Samuel's head the way his sister had taught him years ago and began gently rocking him. "You are making a fuss for no reason, you know. Your mama worked hard on this dinner, and she deserves to eat it while it is still hot." Samuel made a small cooing sound and seemed to settle, his tiny hand grasping at Nathan's shirt. Nathan felt something shift in his chest, some long-buried instinct awakening. He had always liked children, had always imagined having a family of his own someday. But after the war and the years of hard work building his ranch, those dreams had faded into the background. Now, holding this tiny person in his arms, he felt those dreams stirring back to life. "You are good with him," Delilah said quietly. There was something in her voice that Nathan could not quite identify. Wonder, maybe, or disbelief. "I had good teachers," Nathan said. He walked slowly around the room, continuing to rock Samuel gently. "My sister Margaret used to say I was better with babies than half the women in our town. I think she was exaggerating, but I did help with her kids when they were small." "You said she passed," Delilah said carefully. "I am sorry." Nathan's expression darkened. "She and her husband and all 3 kids died of cholera in 1868. I was here in Colorado by then, trying to build this place. By the time I got word and made it back to Missouri, they were already in the ground." He forced himself to shake off the memory. "But that is old pain, and tonight is for new beginnings." "Right, Samuel." The baby had fallen back asleep, his small body completely relaxed against Nathan's chest. Nathan returned him carefully to his cradle, then sat back down at the table. The rest of the meal passed in comfortable conversation, and when Delilah brought out the pie, a perfect apple creation with a golden, flaky crust, Will actually groaned in pleasure. "Madam," he said solemnly, "if the boss here does not treat you right, you just let me know. I will throw him in the creek and take over this ranch myself just to keep eating like this." Everyone laughed, and Nathan saw Delilah's cheeks flush with pleasure at the compliment. She looked happy, he realized. Genuinely happy, maybe for the first time since she had arrived in Greeley. And seeing her that way, smiling and relaxed in his home with his people, Nathan felt something settle into place inside him, like the final piece of a puzzle he had not known he was trying to solve. After dinner, Jack and Will thanked Delilah profusely and headed back to the bunkhouse. Nathan stayed to help clean up, despite Delilah's protests. "You cooked, I clean," he said firmly. "That is only fair." They worked side by side at the sink, Nathan washing while Delilah dried, and the domesticity of it felt right in a way that Nathan could not quite explain. Their hands brushed occasionally as they passed dishes, and each time Nathan felt a little jolt of electricity that had nothing to do with static and everything to do with the woman standing next to him. "Can I ask you something?" Delilah said as they finished up. "Sure." "In town yesterday, those men were saying terrible things. I heard them, even if they thought I could not. They thought I was a prostitute or worse, and that Samuel was a bastard child. You heard them too, I know you did. So why did you defend me? Why did you help me when you had no reason to believe I was anything other than what they thought?" Nathan dried his hands on a towel and turned to face her. "Do you want to know the truth?" "Yes." "Because I looked at you and I saw someone who was fighting to survive, someone who was doing everything they could to protect their child and make a better life. I saw strength and determination and love. Whatever your story is, whatever brought you to Greeley with Samuel and no husband, I figured you had your reasons. And those reasons were none of my business unless you chose to make them my business." Delilah's eyes filled with tears. "You are a good man, Nathan Miller, better than I deserve." "Do not say that," Nathan said sharply. "Do not ever say you do not deserve kindness or respect or basic human decency. Whatever happened to you, whatever you have done or not done, you and Samuel deserve a chance at a good life. Do not let anyone, including yourself, tell you different." A tear spilled down Delilah's cheek, and without thinking, Nathan reached up to brush it away with his thumb. The moment his skin touched hers, they both froze. The air between them seemed to crackle with sudden awareness, and Nathan found himself staring into Delilah's eyes, losing himself in their blue depths. "Nathan," she whispered. "I should go," Nathan said abruptly, dropping his hand and stepping back. "Let you get Samuel back to the cabin and get some rest. Tomorrow is another day." He practically fled from his own house, his heart hammering in his chest. What was wrong with him? Delilah had been here less than 24 hours. She was his employee, a woman in his protection, someone who was clearly running from something and in no position to deal with any kind of romantic attention from him or anyone else. But as Nathan lay in his bed that night, staring at the ceiling and listening to the sounds of the ranch settling in for the night, he could not stop thinking about the way Delilah had looked at him, or the way his heart had jumped when their skin touched, or the way holding little Samuel had felt so natural and right. He was in trouble, Nathan realized. Deep, complicated, terrifying trouble. Because despite all his good intentions and rational thoughts, he was falling for Delilah Kensington, and he had no idea what to do about it. The next few weeks fell into a rhythm that felt both comfortable and dangerous. Delilah settled into her role as housekeeper with impressive efficiency, and the main house had never been cleaner or more welcoming. She cooked 3 meals a day, always delicious and hearty, and somehow managed to keep the house spotless while also caring for Samuel. Nathan found himself looking for excuses to be near the main house during the day. He would come in for water, even when he was not thirsty. He would suddenly remember tools he needed from the shed, right next to the kitchen. He would offer to hold Samuel whenever the baby was fussy, telling himself it was just to help Delilah out, but knowing deep down it was because he loved the way the baby felt in his arms, and the way Delilah smiled when she watched them together. Jack and Will noticed, of course. They teased Nathan mercilessly about finding reasons to be inside during work hours, but they did it good-naturedly, because they both liked Delilah and thought she was good for their boss. Nathan endured the ribbing with as much grace as he could muster, and tried not to think too hard about what it all meant. Delilah, for her part, seemed to be slowly coming back to life. The haunted look faded from her eyes. She gained weight, her cheeks filling out and color returning to her skin. She smiled more often and even laughed at Jack's terrible jokes. Samuel was thriving too, growing chubby and content, his cries becoming less frequent as he settled into the safety and stability of ranch life. But Delilah still had not told Nathan her story, and he had not asked. There was a wall between them, invisible but definite, made up of all the things she was not saying and all the questions he was not asking. Nathan respected that wall, but he also chafed against it because he wanted to know everything about her. Where did she come from? What had happened to Samuel's father? Why had she been so desperate in Greeley that day? The answer came on a Tuesday morning in early September, when a stranger rode into the ranch yard. Nathan was in the corral, working with the young horse he had been training, when he heard the sound of hoofbeats. He looked up to see a man on a gray gelding, well dressed in a suit that was far too expensive for ranch work. The man was maybe 40 years old, with slicked-back black hair and a neatly trimmed mustache. Everything about him screamed money and city living. "Can I help you?" Nathan called, walking over to the fence. The man dismounted smoothly and tied his horse to the rail. "I am looking for a woman," he said without preamble. His voice was cultured but cold. Young, early 20s, dark auburn hair, probably traveling with an infant. "I have reason to believe she may have come through this area." Nathan's entire body went still. "What is your business with this woman?" "That is between me and her," the man said. "But I am prepared to offer a reward for information about her whereabouts. Say $50. It was a substantial sum, more than most ranch hands made in 2 months. The man clearly expected Nathan to jump at the offer. Instead, Nathan leaned against the fence and studied the stranger with cool, assessing eyes. "Who are you?" he asked. "My name is Charles Whitmore. I am a businessman from Denver." "Now, about the woman, never heard of her," Nathan lied smoothly. "Sorry you wasted your trip." Charles's eyes narrowed. "You did not let me finish describing her. Do not need you to. I have not seen any lone women with babies around here. Greeley is the nearest town, about 5 miles south. You might try asking around there." "I already did," Charles said. His tone had gone hard. "Funny thing. Several people told me that about 3 weeks ago, a woman matching that exact description arrived on the stage. And another funny thing, those same people told me that you, Nathan Miller, took her out to your ranch. So I will ask you again, and I suggest you think carefully about your answer. Where is Delilah?" Nathan's hand moved subtly to the pistol at his hip. "I think you had better leave my property, Mr. Whitmore." "Not until I get what I came for," Charles said. He took a step forward, and Nathan saw the calculating look in his eyes. "Delilah is my wife, Mr. Miller. She ran away from me 3 months ago, taking my son with her. I have every legal right to bring her home." The world seemed to tilt sideways. Wife. Samuel's father. This was the nightmare Nathan had known was lurking in Delilah's past, and now it had arrived on his doorstep in an expensive suit and with the law on its side. "If she ran away from you, maybe she had good reason," Nathan said carefully. "What happens between a man and his wife is not your concern," Charles said. "Now, where is she? I can make this easy or I can make it difficult. Your choice." Nathan was saved from having to answer by Delilah herself. She had been in the main house preparing lunch and must have seen Charles ride up because she came out onto the porch, her face pale but her chin high. Samuel was in her arms, and Nathan saw her grip tighten protectively on the baby. "Charles," she said, her voice steady despite the fear Nathan could see in her eyes. "I should have known you would find me eventually." Charles spun around, and his face lit up with a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Delilah, darling, there you are. You have led me on quite a chase, you know. Come now, get your things. We are going home." "I am not going anywhere with you," Delilah said. She walked down the porch steps and came to stand next to Nathan, and he felt her shoulder brush against his arm. "This is my home now. Samuel and I are staying here. Do not be ridiculous, Charles said, and now anger was creeping into his voice. You are my wife. That is my son. You belong with me in Denver, not on some backwater cattle ranch playing housekeeper. I am not your wife anymore, Delilah said. I left you, Charles. I am never coming back. You do not get to just leave, Charles snapped. We are married in the eyes of God and the law. You have no rights here, Delilah. None. I can take you back by force if I have to, and there is not a court in Colorado that would say I was wrong. Nathan stepped forward, placing himself partially between Delilah and Charles. I think the lady has made herself clear, Mr. Whitmore. She does not want to go with you. I suggest you respect that and leave. Charles laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. And who are you to tell me what to do with my own wife? Her employer? Or maybe something more? His eyes raked over Delilah with an expression that made Nathan's blood boil. Have you been warming his bed, Delilah? Is that how you are paying for your room and board? Watch your mouth, Nathan growled. Or what? You will shoot me. Go ahead, try it. Then you can explain to the sheriff why you murdered a man for trying to retrieve his lawfully wedded wife and child. The situation was spiraling out of control. Nathan could feel it, could sense that Charles was the kind of man who would push and push until something broke. He needed to defuse this before it turned violent. Mr. Whitmore, Nathan said, forcing calm into his voice, I understand you are upset, but Delilah has made her position clear. Why do not you head back to town, cool off, and we can discuss this like rational adults? There is nothing to discuss, Charles said. Delilah, you have 1 minute to get Samuel and your belongings and come with me voluntarily. If you do not, I will go to the sheriff and return with a warrant. Your choice. Delilah's hand found Nathan's, her fingers cold and trembling. Nathan, please, she whispered. Do not let him take Samuel, please. I will go with him if I have to, but please do not let him take my baby. And in that moment, Nathan Miller made the second most important decision of his life. Samuel is not your son, Mr. Whitmore, Nathan said clearly. He is mine. The silence that followed was deafening. Charles stared at Nathan in disbelief. Delilah's hand tightened convulsively around Nathan's. Even the horses seemed to have stopped moving. What did you just say? Charles finally managed. I said Samuel is my son, Nathan repeated. His heart was pounding so hard he thought it might burst through his chest, but his voice remained steady. Delilah and I have been together for over a year. She was carrying my child when she married you, probably did not even know it herself at the time. When she realized the truth, she came to me. That is why she is here. That is why Samuel is here, because this is their home with me. It was a lie, a complete fabrication, but Nathan committed to it fully. He put his arm around Delilah's shoulders, pulling her close against his side. She leaned into him, and Nathan prayed she would play along. Charles's face had gone from pale to red to almost purple. You expect me to believe that? You are lying to protect her. Am I? Nathan pulled Delilah even closer. Delilah, darling, why do not you go put Samuel down for his nap? I will handle this. Delilah looked up at him, and Nathan saw the understanding and gratitude and something else, something deeper in her eyes. All right, she said softly. She stood on her toes and, in a move that shocked them both, pressed a quick kiss to Nathan's cheek. Then she turned and hurried back toward the cabin, holding Samuel tight. Nathan turned his full attention back to Charles, who looked like he was about to explode. Even if what you are saying is true, Charles said through gritted teeth, and I do not believe for a second that it is, Delilah is still legally my wife. She cannot just leave me for another man. She can, and she did, Nathan said. And unless you want to stand up in court and admit that the child your wife was carrying was not yours, I suggest you go back to Denver and forget you ever knew Delilah Kensington. Or is it Whitmore? Either way, she is done with you." "This is not over," Charles spat. "I will be back with the law, and we will see what the sheriff has to say about this situation." "You do that," Nathan said calmly. "In the meantime, get off my property before I have you removed for trespassing." Charles stared at him for a long, tense moment, then spun on his heel and stalked back to his horse. He mounted in one smooth motion and wheeled the gelding around. "You have not heard the last of me, Miller," he shouted. Then he spurred his horse into a gallop and disappeared down the road in a cloud of dust. Nathan stood frozen in the yard for a long minute after Charles left, his mind racing. What had he just done? He had claimed another man's child as his own, had told a lie that could have serious legal consequences, had potentially put himself and his ranch at risk. But when he thought about the alternative, about Charles Whitmore dragging Delilah and Samuel back to Denver, about the fear he had seen in Delilah's eyes, Nathan knew he would do it all again in a heartbeat. He walked slowly to the cabin and knocked on the door. "Delilah, can I come in?" The door opened immediately. Delilah stood there with tears streaming down her face, and before Nathan could say anything, she threw her arms around his neck and buried her face against his chest. "Thank you," she sobbed. "Thank you, thank you, thank you. I do not know what you just did or why you did it, but thank you." Nathan wrapped his arms around her, holding her close while she cried. Over her head, he could see Samuel sleeping peacefully in his cradle, unaware of the drama that had just unfolded. "I need you to tell me everything," Nathan said quietly. "All of it, Delilah, the truth. Because if Charles comes back with the sheriff, we need to have our story straight." Delilah pulled back, wiping at her eyes. She nodded and gestured for Nathan to sit at the small table. Then, taking a deep breath, she began to talk. "My name is Delilah Kensington, and I was born in Missouri in 1850, she began. "My father was a schoolteacher. My mother died when I was 8. Father raised me on his own, taught me to read and write and think for myself. He used to say I was too smart and too stubborn for my own good." She paused, a sad smile touching her lips. "When I was 20 years old, Father got sick. Consumption. We did not have money for doctors, so I took a job as a seamstress in Denver to pay for his medicine. That is where I met Charles Whitmore." Nathan listened without interrupting as Delilah told her story. Charles had been charming at first, attentive and generous. He had courted Delilah properly, brought her flowers, taken her to nice restaurants. When he proposed, she had accepted partly because she thought she loved him, but mostly because her father was dying, and she needed financial security. They married in January of 1872. Delilah's father died 2 weeks later. "As soon as we were married, Charles changed," Delilah said, her voice going flat and distant. "He was not cruel exactly, not in ways that left marks, but he was controlling. He did not want me to have friends, did not want me to leave the house without him, did not want me to do anything that was not directly related to being his wife. I was not Delilah anymore. I was Mrs. Whitmore, his possession, something he owned like his furniture or his horses." Nathan felt anger building in his chest, but he kept silent and let her continue. "I got pregnant almost immediately. I was happy about it, thought maybe a baby would make things better. But when I told Charles, he became even more controlling. He said I was carrying his heir and I had to be careful, had to follow his rules, had to do exactly what he said, or I might harm the baby." Delilah's hands clenched into fists on the table. "He locked me in the house, Nathan. Literally locked the doors so I could not leave. He said it was for my own good, for the baby's good. But I felt like I was suffocating, like I was dying by inches in that big, beautiful house with my big, important husband. When I was 7 months pregnant, I overheard Charles talking to his business partner. He was saying how once the baby was born, he planned to send me away to an asylum. He said I was mentally unstable, that pregnancy had made me irrational and hysterical. He was going to take Samuel and raise him alone while I rotted in some institution. Nathan felt sick. Delilah, I am so sorry. I knew I had to leave, Delilah continued, but I had no money, no friends, nowhere to go, so I started planning. I stole small amounts of money whenever I could, hiding it in my sewing basket. I sold my jewelry piece by piece, and I waited. Samuel was born on May 15th. Charles was disappointed he was not more excited about the baby, but I was grateful because it meant he left us alone. 2 weeks after the birth, Charles had to go to Chicago for business. He would be gone for a week. I knew it was my only chance. She looked directly at Nathan. I took Samuel, what little money I had managed to save, and I ran. I made it to the train station and bought a ticket as far as my money would take me, which was Pueblo. From there, I started walking north. I worked odd jobs where I could, slept in barns, begged for food. It took me almost 2 months to make it to Greeley. By the time I got there, I was at the end of my rope. No money, no food, no strength left. I sold my wedding ring for the stage ticket into town, and when I got off that coach, I honestly did not know if I was going to survive another day. And then you were there. Delilah reached across the table and took Nathan's hand. You saved us, Nathan. You gave me hope when I had none left. You gave Samuel a chance at a real life. Whatever happens now, whatever Charles does, I want you to know that you saved us. Nathan squeezed her hand. I am glad I was there, he said simply. And I meant what I said to Charles. Samuel is mine now. I claimed him as my son, and I will stand by that claim no matter what comes. But you could get in trouble, Delilah protested. Charles has money and lawyers and connections. He could make your life very difficult. Let him try, Nathan said. I have been through worse than anything Charles Whitmore can throw at me. Besides, he has a problem. If he pushes this, if he takes it to court, he has to admit in public that his wife left him and the child she bore is not his. Men like Charles, they care a lot about appearances. My guess is he will bluster and threaten, but in the end, he will go back to Denver and pretend we never existed. You do not know Charles, Delilah said. He does not give up on things he thinks belong to him. Then we will deal with it together, Nathan said firmly. He stood up, pulling Delilah to her feet. But right now, we need to make sure our story is solid. If the sheriff does come, we need to be able to answer his questions without contradicting each other. They spent the next hour going over their invented history. They had met in Missouri before the war, had fallen in love but been separated when Nathan went to fight. They had found each other again 2 years ago in 1870 and had carried on a secret relationship. Delilah had not known she was pregnant when she married Charles. By the time she realized, she had been trapped. She had bided her time, waiting for the baby to be born and for a chance to escape back to Nathan, the man she really loved. It was a good story, plausible enough to be believed and complicated enough that Charles would have trouble disproving it. Nathan just hoped they would never have to use it. As it turned out, they did not have to wait long to find out. The next morning, Sheriff Tom Caldwell rode out to the ranch with 2 deputies in tow. Nathan met them in the yard, his hands resting casually on his belt near his gun. Jack and Will flanked him, showing silent support. "Sheriff," Nathan said calmly, "what brings you out this way?" "Got a complaint from a man named Charles Whitmore," Sheriff Caldwell said. He was in his 50s, a fair man who had been keeping the peace in Greeley for over a decade. "Says you are harboring his runaway wife and child. Says he wants them returned to him, by legal force if necessary." "Is that so?" Nathan said. Well, I hate to disappoint Mr. Whitmore, but the woman and child living on my ranch are not his wife and child. They are mine. The sheriff's eyebrows rose. That is a pretty serious claim, Nathan. You got any proof of that? Do I need proof that I have a woman and child living with me? This is my land, Sheriff. I can have whoever I want living here. That is true enough, the sheriff acknowledged. But Mr. Whitmore says the woman is his legal wife, and he has a marriage certificate to prove it. Says the baby was born 6 months after their wedding, which makes the child his by law. The baby was born 7 months after their wedding, not 6, Nathan corrected. And Delilah only married Whitmore because she thought I was dead. She and I have a history going back years. Samuel is my son, conceived before Delilah ever met Whitmore, Sheriff Caldwell sighed. This is getting complicated. I need to talk to the woman herself, Nathan. Let her tell her side of the story. That is fine, Nathan said, but you will talk to her here on my property with me present. She is under my protection, and I will not have her intimidated. The sheriff nodded. Fair enough. Send for her, would you? Nathan gestured to Jack, who went to fetch Delilah from the cabin. She arrived a few minutes later, carrying Samuel, with Jack walking protectively beside her. She looked scared but determined, and when she reached Nathan's side, he put his arm around her shoulders in a gesture of support and possession. Mrs. Whitmore, the sheriff began. Kensington, Delilah interrupted firmly. My name is Delilah Kensington. I never took Charles's name, not really. Not in my heart. All right, Miss Kensington. Your husband, former husband. I am not going back to him, Sheriff. You cannot make me. Sheriff Caldwell held up a placating hand. Nobody is making you do anything right now, miss. I just need to understand the situation. Mr. Whitmore says you are married to him and the baby is his. Mr. Miller here says the baby is his. I need to know the truth. Delilah took a deep breath. Charles and I were married, yes, but I married him under false circumstances. I thought Nathan was dead, killed in the war. I was alone and scared and desperate. Charles offered me security and I took it, but I never loved him. I have only ever loved one man. She looked up at Nathan, and the expression in her eyes was so real, so raw that Nathan felt his breath catch. Was she acting, or was there truth in that look? 2 months ago, I found out Charles was planning to have me committed to an asylum after Samuel was born, Delilah continued. He wanted to take my baby and lock me away. So I ran. I came here to Nathan, the only man I have ever trusted, the only man I have ever loved. And he took us in, protected us, claimed Samuel as his own. Because Samuel is his own. I was already carrying Nathan's child when I married Charles. I just did not know it yet. The sheriff looked between Nathan, Delilah, and the baby, his expression thoughtful. That is quite a story, Miss Kensington. But how do I know it is the truth? How do I know you are not just making this up to avoid going back to a husband you do not like? Because I would never lie about my child's paternity, Delilah said fiercely. Because I would rather die than go back to that house and that man. Because I love Nathan Miller and I always have, and that is the God's honest truth. Nathan felt her words hit him like a physical blow. She sounded so sincere, so passionate. He wanted to believe she meant it, that she was not just playing a role for the sheriff's benefit. Sheriff, I do not know what Charles Whitmore told you, but I know what I saw when Delilah arrived here, Nathan said. I saw a woman who was terrified and desperate, running for her life and her child's life. I saw a woman who had been abused and controlled. Whatever legal document says she is Whitmore's wife, morally and ethically, she has every right to leave him and make a new life for herself. Sheriff Caldwell was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he said, Mr. Whitmore claims the child looks like him, dark hair, blue eyes. Samuel looks like his mother, Nathan said firmly. Look at him, Sheriff. Those are Delilah's eyes, clear as day. The sheriff peered at the baby, then at Delilah, then back at the baby. "I suppose that is true," he admitted, "and the hair could be from either side." "Sheriff, with all due respect, you cannot send a woman back to a man who wants to lock her in an asylum," Nathan said. "Even if everything Charles Whitmore says is true, even if they are legally married and Samuel is legally his child, that does not give him the right to destroy Delilah's life. She came to me for protection, and I am giving it to her. If you have a problem with that, you will have to arrest me." The sheriff rubbed his face tiredly. "I do not want to arrest anybody, Nathan, but this is a legal mess, and I do not have the authority to sort it out. This kind of thing needs to go before a judge." "Then let it go before a judge," Nathan said. "But until that happens, Delilah and Samuel stay here with me. Do we understand each other?" Sheriff Caldwell studied Nathan for a long moment, then sighed. "I understand you are a stubborn man who has made up his mind. And I understand that Miss Kensington here seems genuinely afraid of Mr. Whitmore. I also understand that there is reasonable doubt about the paternity of the child." He turned to his deputies. "We are leaving. I will report back to Mr. Whitmore that the situation is complicated and will require legal proceedings to resolve." "Thank you, Sheriff," Nathan said. As the lawmen mounted up to leave, Sheriff Caldwell paused and looked back at Nathan. "For what it is worth, Nathan, I hope you know what you are doing. Taking on another man's wife and child, even if you believe they are really yours, that is a dangerous game. Whitmore is not going to let this go easily." "I know," Nathan said, "but some things are worth the danger." The sheriff nodded and rode away with his deputies. As soon as they were out of sight, Delilah sagged against Nathan, her whole body shaking. "It is all right," Nathan murmured, holding her close. "You did great. The sheriff believes us, or at least he has enough doubt that he will not force you to go back to Charles." "But this is not over," Delilah said, her voice muffled against his chest. "Charles will take this to court. He will drag it out, make it public, try to destroy both of us." "Maybe," Nathan acknowledged. "Or maybe he will decide it is not worth the scandal and the public admission that his wife left him. Either way, we will face it together. You are not alone anymore, Delilah. Remember that." She pulled back and looked up at him, her blue eyes shimmering with tears. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Why are you risking everything for me and Samuel? We are nothing to you, just a housekeeper and her baby." Nathan reached up and gently brushed a strand of hair away from her face. His hand lingered on her cheek, and he felt her lean into his touch. "You are not nothing to me," he said quietly. "You stopped being nothing to me the moment I saw you step off that stagecoach. I do not fully understand it myself, Delilah, but I know that you and Samuel belong here, with me, on this ranch. And I will do whatever it takes to keep you safe and keep you here." "Nathan," Delilah whispered. She stood on her toes, and Nathan bent his head, and for one breathless moment he thought they were going to kiss. But then Samuel let out a wail, breaking the spell, and they both jerked back. "He is hungry," Delilah said, her cheeks flushed. "I should feed him." "Right," Nathan said, feeling awkward and confused and more alive than he had felt in years. "You do that. I need to get back to work anyway. Cattle do not herd themselves." He walked away quickly, his heart pounding. What was happening between them? The lie they had told the sheriff, the claim he had made that Samuel was his son, the way Delilah had said she loved him, even if it was just an act, all of it was blurring the lines between fiction and reality. And the most dangerous part was that Nathan was starting to wish the fiction was real. The next 2 weeks passed in tense anticipation. Every day, Nathan half expected Charles Whitmore to return with lawyers and court orders. But there was only silence from Denver, and gradually, the household began to relax. Delilah continued her work as housekeeper, but the relationship between her and Nathan had shifted into something new and uncertain. They were more careful around each other, more aware of every touch and glance. Nathan caught himself watching her constantly, memorizing the way she moved around the kitchen, the sound of her laughter when Will told a joke, the tender way she cared for Samuel. And sometimes he would look up to find her watching him with an expression he could not quite read. Longing, curiosity, fear, maybe all three. One evening in late September, after dinner had been cleared away and Jack and Will had gone to the bunkhouse, Nathan and Delilah found themselves alone on the main house porch. Samuel was sleeping peacefully in the cradle inside, and the night was warm and clear, with stars spreading across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. "It is beautiful here," Delilah said softly. She was leaning against the porch railing, looking out at the darkened landscape. "So peaceful. I never thought I would feel safe again, but I do here, because of you." Nathan moved to stand beside her. "I am glad you feel that way. You deserve to feel safe, Delilah. You and Samuel both." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the ranch. Finally, Delilah said, "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why have you never married? A man like you with land and a successful ranch, you could have your pick of women. Why are you alone?" Nathan considered his answer carefully. "I guess I was waiting for the right person. After the war, after everything I saw and did, I was not fit company for anyone. It took me years to feel human again. And by the time I had built this place up and was ready to think about a family, I realized I did not want just anyone. I wanted someone who understood struggle and survival. Someone strong, someone real." He turned to look at her. "Someone like you," Delilah's breath caught. "Nathan, I am not who you think I am. I am damaged, broken. I have a child by a man I hate. I am probably still legally married to him, and I come with more problems than any man should have to deal with. You deserve better than me." "You are not damaged," Nathan said fiercely. "You are a survivor, and as for deserving better, that is not for you to decide. I want you here, Delilah, you and Samuel, not as my housekeeper but as my family. I know it is fast, I know it is complicated, but I cannot deny what I feel anymore." "What do you feel?" Delilah whispered. Nathan took a deep breath. This was it, the moment of truth. "I am falling in love with you," he said simply. "Maybe I already have fallen. I do not know exactly when it happened, but I know that the thought of you leaving, of Charles taking you away, makes me want to tear the world apart. I know that holding Samuel feels right in a way nothing else ever has. I know that when I claimed him as my son, it did not feel like a lie. It felt like the truth I had been waiting my whole life to speak." Delilah's eyes were wide and shining in the starlight. "I do not know what to say." "You do not have to say anything," Nathan said. "I just needed you to know the truth. I am not asking you for anything, Delilah. You have been through hell, and the last thing you need is pressure from me. But I want you to know that if you ever feel ready, if you ever think you could feel the same way, I am here. I will wait as long as it takes." "Nathan," Delilah said, and now tears were streaming down her face. "I already do feel the same way. That is what scares me so much. I thought I loved Charles once, and look how that turned out. How do I know I am not making the same mistake again? How do I know you will not change once you really have me?" Nathan reached out and cupped her face in his hands, using his thumbs to wipe away her tears. "You do not know," he said honestly. "There are no guarantees in life, Delilah, but I can tell you this, I am not Charles Whitmore. I do not want to own you or control you. I want to stand beside you as your partner, your equal. I want to help you raise Samuel and maybe, if we are lucky, give him brothers and sisters. I want to wake up next to you every morning for the rest of my life and know that you chose to be there because you wanted to be, not because you had no other choice." "You make it sound so simple," Delilah whispered. "It is simple," Nathan said. "I love you, you love me." Everything else is just details we will figure out as we go. But Charles will not touch you. I promise you that. Whether we have to go to court, whether we have to fight this legally, whatever it takes, I will protect you and Samuel. You are mine now, Delilah. Not because I am claiming ownership, but because you have my heart, and I am choosing to stand with you. Do you understand? Delilah nodded slowly. Then, with a sound that was half laugh and half sob, she threw her arms around Nathan's neck and kissed him. It was not a tentative kiss, or a careful kiss. It was desperate and passionate and full of all the emotions they had both been holding back for weeks. Nathan wrapped his arms around her waist and pulled her close, kissing her back with everything he had. She tasted like hope and happiness and home, and Nathan knew with absolute certainty that this was where he was meant to be, with this woman in his arms and her child sleeping peacefully inside his house. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Delilah pressed her forehead against Nathan's chest. "I love you," she said. "I know I should not. I know it is too fast and too complicated, but I do. I love you, Nathan Miller." "I love you too," Nathan murmured into her hair. "And we will make this work, Delilah. I promise you that." They stood there on the porch, holding each other under the stars, and for the first time since her father had died, Delilah felt truly at peace. She had found her home, her safe harbor, her second chance at happiness. And she was never letting it go. The next morning brought news that would change everything. A rider arrived from town with a letter for Nathan. It was from a law firm in Denver, written on behalf of Charles Whitmore. Nathan read it with a sinking feeling in his stomach. The letter informed him that Charles was filing for divorce from Delilah on grounds of abandonment and adultery. He was also filing a lawsuit against Nathan for alienation of affection and for making false claims about Samuel's paternity. The letter demanded that Nathan and Delilah appear in Denver in 2 weeks to answer these charges in court. "This is it," Delilah said when Nathan showed her the letter. Her face had gone pale. "This is Charles making his move. He is going to try to destroy us both." "Let him try," Nathan said grimly. "We have the truth on our side." "But do we?" Delilah asked. "Nathan, we lied about Samuel. We lied to the sheriff, and now we are going to have to lie in court. What if they figure it out? What if they call witnesses who can prove we never knew each other before I came to Colorado? We could both go to jail for perjury." Nathan had thought about this, had lost sleep over it, but he also knew they had no choice. "We stick to our story," he said. "Charles cannot prove we did not know each other before. He cannot prove Samuel is not mine. All he has is suspicion and anger. We have something stronger. We have love, and we have the willingness to fight for each other." "We need a lawyer," Delilah said. "Someone who can help us navigate this." Nathan nodded. "I know a man in Denver. His name is Robert Jameson. He is honest and smart, and he has experience with family law. I will send him a telegram today, see if he will take our case." Over the next week, they prepared for the legal battle ahead. Robert Jameson agreed to represent them and came out to the ranch to hear their story. He was a tall, thin man in his 50s with sharp eyes and a skeptical manner, but after talking with Nathan and Delilah for several hours, he agreed to take the case. "I believe you," he told them. "Or at least, I believe that Delilah had every right to leave Whitmore and that Nathan has every right to claim Samuel if he genuinely believes the child is his. Whether a judge will see it that way is another matter entirely, but I will do my best to defend you." The 2 weeks passed far too quickly. Before Nathan knew it, he was boarding a train to Denver with Delilah, Samuel, and Robert Jameson. Jack and Will stayed behind to run the ranch, with strict instructions to keep everything running smoothly no matter what happened in court. Denver was a sprawling city compared to Greeley, full of noise and people and buildings that seemed to reach toward the sky. Delilah clutched Samuel close and stayed near Nathan as they made their way to the hotel Robert had booked for them. They had separate rooms to maintain propriety, but Nathan made sure his room was right next to Delilah's so he could reach her quickly if she needed him. The court hearing was scheduled for the next day at 10 in the morning. That night, Nathan lay in his bed and stared at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Tomorrow would determine everything. If they lost, if the judge ruled in Charles's favor, Delilah could be forced to return to her husband, and Samuel could be taken away from both of them. Nathan could face criminal charges for his lies. But if they won, if the judge believed their story and granted Delilah a divorce, they would be free to build the life they both wanted. Nathan finally dozed off sometime near dawn, only to be woken a few hours later by Robert Jameson knocking on his door. "Time to go," the lawyer said. "Court starts in an hour, and we need to go over your testimony one more time." The courthouse was an impressive stone building in the heart of Denver. As they walked up the steps, Nathan saw Charles Whitmore standing near the entrance with his own lawyer, a slick-looking man in an expensive suit. Charles's eyes locked onto Delilah, and Nathan saw him smile, a cold, triumphant expression that made Nathan want to punch him. Instead, he put his arm around Delilah and guided her past Charles without a word. They took their seats in the courtroom, and Robert arranged his papers while they waited for the judge to arrive. When the bailiff finally called the court to order, and Judge Hamilton entered, Nathan felt his heart start to pound. The judge was an older man with gray hair and a stern expression, the kind of man who had probably seen every type of case imaginable and was not easily fooled. "This is a hearing to address complaints filed by Mr. Charles Whitmore regarding his wife, Delilah Whitmore, and the child known as Samuel," the judge began. "Mr. Whitmore claims his wife abandoned him and is now living in adultery with Mr. Nathan Miller. He further claims that Mr. Miller has falsely stated that the child Samuel is his biological son when in fact the child belongs to Mr. Whitmore." "How do the defendants plead?" "Not guilty, Your Honor," Robert Jameson said, standing. "My clients maintain that Samuel is indeed Mr. Miller's biological child, conceived before Mrs. Whitmore's marriage to Mr. Whitmore. Furthermore, we will show that Mrs. Whitmore had valid reasons for leaving her husband and seeking the protection of Mr. Miller." "Very well," the judge said. "Mr. Whitmore, you may present your case first." What followed was 3 hours of testimony that made Nathan's blood boil. Charles took the stand and painted himself as a devoted husband whose wife had inexplicably abandoned him, taking his newborn son. He claimed to have no idea why Delilah had left, saying she had seemed perfectly happy in their marriage. He produced the marriage certificate, Samuel's birth certificate listing him as the father, and several witnesses who testified that they had seen Charles and Delilah together during her pregnancy, and that Charles had seemed excited about becoming a father. Charles's lawyer then called Delilah to the stand. Nathan watched her walk up there, her head high despite her obvious fear, and he willed her to be strong. "Mrs. Whitmore," Charles's lawyer began, "is it true that you married my client, Charles Whitmore, in January of this year?" "Yes," Delilah said. "And is it true that you were living as his wife up until 2 months ago when you abandoned him?" "I did not abandon him. I escaped from him." "Escaped?" The lawyer's tone was mocking. "From what exactly? A beautiful home, financial security, a husband who provided for you." "From a man who kept me locked in that house," Delilah said, her voice rising. "From a man who controlled every aspect of my life, who threatened to have me committed to an asylum, who treated me like property instead of a person." "Do you have any proof of these allegations?" "No." Charles was too smart to leave evidence. How convenient. Now, Mrs. Whitmore, you claim that your son Samuel is not my client's child, but rather the child of Mr. Nathan Miller. Is that correct? Yes. And when did you and Mr. Miller supposedly conceive this child? In the summer of 1871, before I married Charles. Yet you married my client in January of 1872. If you knew you were pregnant with another man's child, why would you go through with the marriage? I did not know I was pregnant, Delilah said. I thought my symptoms were just stress from my father's illness. I did not realize I was carrying Nathan's child until I was already married to Charles. How very unfortunate for everyone involved. Tell me, Mrs. Whitmore, when is the last time you saw Mr. Miller before arriving at his ranch 2 months ago? This was the crucial question, the one they had prepared for. Delilah met Charles's lawyer's eyes steadily. I last saw Nathan in the fall of 1870 in Missouri. We had been corresponding through letters, but we had not seen each other in person until I arrived in Colorado. Where are these letters? I destroyed them when I married Charles. I thought Nathan was dead, and I did not want to keep reminders of him. How very convenient again. So we are supposed to take your word for this entire story. A secret romance, a pregnancy you did not know about, letters that no longer exist. Mrs. Whitmore, is it not more likely that you simply regretted your marriage to my client and invented this story to justify your adultery with Mr. Miller? No, Delilah said firmly. That is not what happened. Then explain to the court why, if you were so desperately unhappy, you did not simply ask your husband for a divorce rather than running away with his child. Because Charles would never have agreed to a divorce, and even if he had, he would have kept Samuel. He told me himself that Samuel was his heir, that I was just a vessel for producing children. He would have taken my son away from me, and I would never have seen him again. Charles's lawyer smirked. Your Honor, I believe we have established that the defendant has no proof of her claims. No evidence of this supposed relationship with Mr. Miller before her marriage. No evidence of abuse or mistreatment by my client. All we have is her word, which is clearly unreliable given that she has admitted to abandoning her lawful husband and living in sin with another man. He sat down looking satisfied, and Nathan felt panic rising in his chest. This was not going well. The lawyer had made Delilah look like a liar and a runaway wife, and they had no hard evidence to counter his claims. But Robert Jameson was not finished yet. He stood and approached the bench. Your Honor, I would like to call Mr. Nathan Miller to the stand. Nathan stood and walked to the witness box, his heart pounding. He placed his hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth, all the while knowing that he was about to lie under oath. Robert began his questioning. Mr. Miller, how long have you known Delilah Kensington? I met her in Missouri in 1869 when she was 19 years old. We fell in love almost immediately. And what was the nature of your relationship? We wanted to get married, but I did not have the money to support a wife yet. I was still saving to buy my ranch. We agreed that I would go to Colorado, establish myself, and then send for her. But then the war started, my ranch plans were delayed. We stayed in touch through letters, but it was difficult. When did you last see Miss Kensington before this year? In the fall of 1870. I had come back to Missouri briefly to visit my sister. Delilah and I spent 3 days together before I had to return to Colorado. That was when Samuel was conceived. Nathan forced himself to meet the judge's eyes as he said this, willing him to believe the lie. And when did you next hear from Miss Kensington? I did not. She stopped writing to me after that visit. I later learned that her father had died and she had moved to Denver. I tried to find her, but I had no luck. I thought I had lost her forever. So when she appeared at your ranch 2 months ago, you were surprised. Shocked is more accurate. But the moment I saw Samuel, I knew he was mine. He has his mother's eyes and his father's determination. I claimed him immediately because I recognized him as my son." Robert nodded. "And what are your intentions toward Miss Kensington and Samuel now?" "I intend to marry Delilah as soon as she is legally free from her marriage to Mr. Whitmore. I intend to raise Samuel as my son, which he is. And I intend to protect them both from anyone who would try to hurt them or take them away from me." Nathan looked directly at Charles as he said this, and he saw the other man's face flush with anger. Charles's lawyer cross-examined Nathan, trying to trip him up in his story, looking for inconsistencies and contradictions. But Nathan had prepared well, and he stuck to his testimony without wavering. Finally, frustrated, the lawyer let him go. The judge called for a recess to consider the evidence. Nathan, Delilah, and Robert waited in a small room near the courtroom, and the minutes crawled by with agonizing slowness. Delilah was shaking, and Nathan held her hand tightly, trying to give her strength. "Whatever happens, we will get through it," he murmured to her. "I promise." After what felt like an eternity, they were called back into the courtroom. Judge Hamilton looked at them all with his stern, unreadable expression. "I have reviewed the testimony and evidence presented today," he began. "This is a complicated case with serious implications. On one hand, Mr. Whitmore has presented a legal marriage certificate and a birth certificate listing him as the father of Samuel. On the other hand, Miss Kensington and Mr. Miller have presented testimony suggesting that Samuel was conceived before the marriage and that Miss Kensington had valid reasons for leaving Mr. Whitmore." Nathan held his breath. "The problem is that there is no definitive proof either way," the judge continued. "Both sides have presented plausible stories, but both sides also have reasons to lie. Mr. Whitmore could be lying about his treatment of Miss Kensington to avoid looking bad. Miss Kensington and Mr. Miller could be lying about their prior relationship to avoid adultery charges. This was it. They were going to lose. Nathan felt Delilah's hand tighten convulsively around his. "However," the judge said, and Nathan's head snapped up, "I am troubled by Mr. Whitmore's lack of concern for the child's welfare. Throughout this entire proceeding, he has focused on his rights as a husband and father, but he has shown very little actual interest in Samuel as a person. Mr. Miller, on the other hand, has demonstrated genuine affection and concern for the child, even holding him during parts of this hearing." Nathan glanced down. He had not even realized he had reached for Samuel when Delilah had started shaking. The baby was cradled in his arms, sleeping peacefully. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "I am inclined to believe Miss Kensington's testimony about her treatment by Mr. Whitmore. I have been a judge for 30 years, and I know the signs of an abused woman when I see them. Miss Kensington is terrified of her husband, and that fear seems genuine and justified." Charles started to protest, but his lawyer grabbed his arm to silence him. "Therefore, I am ruling as follows. First, I am granting Miss Kensington a divorce from Mr. Whitmore on grounds of extreme cruelty. Second, I am declaring that there is reasonable doubt about the paternity of the child Samuel, and in the absence of definitive proof, I am ruling in favor of Mr. Miller's claim. Samuel will remain in the custody of his mother, Delilah Kensington, and Mr. Miller will be recognized as the child's father. Third, I am ordering Mr. Whitmore to stay away from Miss Kensington and Samuel. If he makes any attempt to contact them or harm them in any way, he will face criminal charges. This hearing is concluded." For a moment, Nathan could not process what he had just heard. Then it hit him all at once. They had won. Delilah was free. Samuel was legally his son. They had won. Delilah burst into tears, sobbing into Nathan's shoulder while he held both her and Samuel, his own eyes stinging with unshed tears. Behind them, Charles was shouting something, but Nathan did not care. It was over. They were safe. They were free. Robert Jameson shook Nathan's hand with a grin. "Well fought," he said. "Now get your family home, Nathan. You have a wedding to plan." The journey back to Greeley felt like a dream. Nathan kept expecting to wake up and find that the judge's ruling had been reversed, that it had all been a mistake. But it was real. Delilah was free. Samuel was his, and they could finally stop running and start living. When they arrived back at the ranch 3 days later, Jack and Will were waiting in the yard with huge grins on their faces. News of the court victory had preceded them, carried by telegram, and the ranch hands had decorated the front porch with ribbons and wildflowers in celebration. "Welcome home, boss," Jack said, clapping Nathan on the shoulder. "Or should I say, welcome home, Pa?" Nathan laughed, feeling lighter than he had in weeks. "Pa sounds good to me." That night, after dinner and after Samuel had been put to bed, Nathan and Delilah walked down to the river together. The autumn air was cool and crisp, and the stars were just beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "I cannot believe it is really over," Delilah said softly. "I keep thinking Charles is going to appear, that this is all going to be taken away from us." "It is over," Nathan said firmly. "Charles cannot touch you anymore. The law is on our side now." He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Delilah Kensington, I have been waiting to ask you this question properly. Will you marry me? Not because you need my protection, not because we told lies in court, but because I love you and I want to spend the rest of my life with you and Samuel." Delilah's eyes filled with happy tears. "Yes," she said. "Yes, Nathan, I will marry you. I love you so much." Nathan pulled a ring from his pocket, a simple gold band with a small blue stone that matched Delilah's eyes. He had bought it in Denver, hoping for this moment. He slid it onto her finger and it fit perfectly. Then he kissed her, pouring all his love and hope and joy into that kiss. Delilah kissed him back with equal passion, and Nathan thought that this moment, right here by the river with the woman he loved in his arms, was the best moment of his entire life. They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Greeley. It was a simple ceremony, attended by Jack and Will, a few of the townspeople who had come around to accepting Delilah, and Sheriff Caldwell, who had become something of an ally after the court case. Samuel slept peacefully in the front pew, watched over by Martha Henley, who had apologized to Delilah for her initial coldness and offered to help with the wedding preparations. Delilah wore a dress of soft ivory cotton that Martha had helped her sew, with wildflowers in her hair. Nathan wore his best suit, the one he saved for special occasions, and he could not stop smiling as Delilah walked down the aisle toward him. When the minister asked if he took this woman to be his wife, Nathan said, "I do," with absolute conviction. And when Delilah said the same words back to him, Nathan felt something settle into place in his soul. A missing piece he had not known was absent until now. They exchanged rings, Nathan placing his mother's wedding band on Delilah's finger next to the engagement ring, and then the minister pronounced them husband and wife. "You may kiss your bride," the minister said with a smile. Nathan did not need to be told twice. He pulled Delilah close and kissed her thoroughly, to the cheers and applause of their small gathering of friends and family. The celebration afterward was held at the ranch, with food and music and dancing that lasted late into the night. Jack played the fiddle, Will sang, and even Sheriff Caldwell did a few turns around the dance floor with Martha Henley. Samuel woke up for a while and was passed around among the guests, cooed over and cuddled, before falling back asleep in his father's arms. As the sun set and the party began to wind down, Nathan found himself standing on the porch with Delilah beside him, watching their friends enjoy themselves. Samuel was asleep against his shoulder, his tiny hand curled around Nathan's collar. "Happy?" Nathan asked Delilah. She smiled up at him, and Nathan thought he had never seen anything more beautiful. "Happier than I ever thought possible. You gave me everything I thought I had lost forever. Hope, safety, love, a home. You gave me those things too," Nathan said. "Before you came, this place was just a ranch, just land and cattle and buildings. Now it is a home, our home, and I could not be more grateful." Delilah leaned her head against his shoulder, and they stood there together, watching the stars come out one by one. Inside the house, their friends laughed and sang. In Nathan's arms, their son slept peacefully. And all around them, the ranch stretched out into the darkness, their little piece of paradise carved out of the wild Colorado landscape. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm after the wedding. Delilah was no longer the housekeeper, but the lady of the house, Nathan's equal partner in running the ranch and raising their son. She proved to have a good head for business, and Nathan started consulting her on major decisions about the herd and the land. Samuel grew like a weed, hitting every milestone right on schedule. His first real smile was for Nathan, who had been making ridiculous faces trying to get a reaction. His first word was "da," which made Nathan's heart swell with pride, even though Delilah jokingly complained that she had done all the work of carrying and birthing him. The town of Greeley gradually accepted Delilah as one of their own. It helped that she was now respectably married, and that the story of her escape from an abusive husband had made the rounds, painting her more as a sympathetic figure than a scarlet woman. She made friends with some of the other ranch wives and became known for her excellent baking, often trading pies and bread for goods from the general store. Nathan could not remember ever being this happy. He woke up every morning with Delilah beside him, her head on his shoulder and her dark auburn hair spread across the pillow. He worked hard during the day, building up the ranch and planning for the future. And he came home every evening to a warm house, a delicious meal, and a family that loved him. It was everything he had ever wanted, and more than he had ever dared to dream of. Winter came to Colorado with its usual intensity, bringing snow and freezing temperatures. Nathan made sure the cabin where Delilah had first stayed was winterized and converted into a storage shed, since she was living in the main house now. He stocked up on supplies, made sure the animals had shelter, and prepared for the long months ahead. On Christmas morning, Nathan woke to find Delilah already up, sitting in the rocking chair by the fireplace with Samuel in her arms. She was singing softly to the baby, a lullaby Nathan did not recognize, and the sight of them there in the golden firelight made his chest tighten with emotion. "Merry Christmas," he said softly, not wanting to break the peaceful moment. Delilah looked up with a smile. "Merry Christmas, husband, I have a gift for you." "Oh," Nathan sat up, intrigued. They had agreed not to exchange gifts since money was tight after the legal fees from the divorce case, but apparently Delilah had other ideas. She stood and brought Samuel over to the bed, placing the baby in Nathan's arms. Then she sat down beside him and took his free hand, placing it on her stomach. Nathan's eyes widened. "Delilah, are you?" "Pregnant," she confirmed, her smile growing. "About 2 months along, I think. Samuel is going to be a big brother." Nathan felt tears prick his eyes. Another child. A baby that would truly be his from conception, a brother or sister for Samuel. The family he had always wanted was growing, expanding, becoming more real with every passing day. "That is the best Christmas present anyone has ever given me," he said, his voice rough with emotion. He leaned over and kissed Delilah tenderly, carefully, as if she were made of glass. "Thank you. Thank you for everything, for Samuel, for this new baby, for choosing me." "Thank you for claiming us," Delilah whispered back. "Thank you for being brave enough to lie for us, to fight for us, to make us yours. You are the best man I have ever known, Nathan Miller, and I love you more than words can say." They sat there together, the three of them soon to be four, and Nathan knew that this was what happiness felt like. Not the absence of problems or the presence of riches, but simply the knowledge that you were exactly where you were supposed to be, with the people you were meant to be with. Spring came with its usual explosion of green and wildflowers, and Delilah's pregnancy progressed smoothly. She continued to help run the household until she grew too big and uncomfortable, at which point Nathan hired a girl from town to help with the cooking and cleaning. Delilah spent her days resting, playing with Samuel, and preparing for the new baby's arrival. Nathan hovered over her like a mother hen, driving her crazy with his constant concern. Was she eating enough? Resting enough? Should she be walking that much? Was she sure she felt all right? "Nathan, I am pregnant, not dying," Delilah finally said with exasperation after he had forbidden her from carrying a basket of laundry. "I did this before, remember? I know what I am doing." I know," Nathan said sheepishly. "I just want to make sure you and the baby are safe." Delilah's expression softened. "We are safe, because you are here. Now stop fussing and go work on that fence you have been meaning to fix for 2 weeks." The baby, a girl they named Sarah after Nathan's mother, was born on a warm evening in early July 1873. The birth was easier than Samuel's had been, according to Delilah, and when Nathan was finally allowed into the bedroom to meet his daughter, he felt his heart expand in ways he had not known were possible. Sarah had wisps of dark hair and eyes that were still the unclear blue of all newborns, but Nathan thought she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. He held her with the same tender care he had shown Samuel, marveling at her tiny fingers and perfect little features. "She is perfect," he whispered to Delilah, who looked exhausted but happy in the bed. "You are perfect. Our family is perfect." Samuel, now almost 14 months old and toddling around on unsteady legs, was fascinated by his new sister. He would pat her gently on the head and babble at her in his own language, and Nathan thought his heart might actually burst from the sweetness of it all. Life continued its peaceful rhythm. The ranch prospered, with Nathan expanding his herd and acquiring another 100 acres of land to the east. Jack and Will both found wives and started building their own cabins on the far corners of Nathan's property, staying on as partners in the growing operation. Samuel grew into a bright, curious little boy who followed Nathan everywhere, wanting to help with every task. Sarah was a happy baby who rarely cried and seemed content to observe the world from her mother's arms or her father's shoulder, and Nathan and Delilah's love deepened with every passing season. They worked together, raised their children together, faced challenges together. There were hard times, of course. A bad winter in 1874 that killed some of their cattle, a drought in 1875 that tested everyone's patience. The usual struggles of running a ranch and raising young children, but through it all, they had each other. And that made everything bearable, everything worthwhile. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Nathan took Delilah back to the spot by the river where he had proposed. The children were with Martha Henley for the evening, giving them some rare alone time. "Do you remember the day we met?" Nathan asked, holding Delilah close as they watched the water flow past. "How could I forget?" Delilah said. "I was terrified and desperate, convinced my life was over, and then you appeared, my unexpected savior." "I think we saved each other," Nathan said. "You gave me a reason to be more than just a rancher. You gave me a family, a purpose beyond just accumulating land and cattle. You made me into the man I always wanted to be. And you gave me hope when I had none," Delilah said. You showed me what real love looks like, what a real partnership can be. You claimed my child as your own without hesitation, and you have loved him every day since as if he truly came from you." "He did come from me," Nathan said firmly. "Maybe not biologically, but in every way that matters. Samuel is my son, Delilah, just as much as Sarah is my daughter. They are both mine, and I love them both with everything I have." Delilah turned in his arms and kissed him, and Nathan thought that this moment was as perfect as the one 5 years ago when he had first seen her step off that stagecoach. "I love you, Nathan Miller," Delilah said. "Thank you for saving me. Thank you for giving me a life I never dreamed possible." "I love you too," Nathan said. "And I would do it all again in a heartbeat. Every lie, every risk, every challenge. You and Samuel and Sarah are worth it all." As the sun set over their land, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, Nathan and Delilah stood together by the river. Two souls who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from the ashes of their broken pasts. The years continued to pass, marked by the rhythms of ranch life and family milestones. Samuel started school in Greeley when he was 6, riding into town every morning on his pony with Nathan escorting him until he was old enough to go alone. He was a smart boy who excelled at reading and mathematics, and his teachers said he had a bright future ahead of him. Sarah grew into a spirited little girl who was afraid of nothing and charmed everyone she met. She started helping her mother in the garden when she was 4, showing a natural talent for coaxing things to grow. In 1878, Delilah gave birth to twin boys, Thomas and James, who kept the entire household in chaos with their constant energy and mischief. Nathan had never been so exhausted or so happy. And in 1880, their youngest, a daughter named Margaret after Nathan's late sister, completed their family. 5 children, a thriving ranch, and a love that had only grown stronger with time. Nathan looked at his life and could not find a single thing he would change. Charles Whitmore never appeared again. Nathan heard through the grapevine that he had remarried to a wealthy widow from New York and had moved back east. Apparently, his business in Denver had failed after a series of bad investments, and he had left Colorado in disgrace. Nathan felt no satisfaction in Charles's downfall, only relief that the man was gone and could never threaten his family again. One evening in the late summer of 1885, Nathan sat on his porch watching the sunset with Delilah beside him. Their children were scattered around the yard. Samuel, now 13 and already showing signs of becoming as tall as his father, was teaching 8-year-old Thomas how to rope a fence post. Sarah, 10 years old and fearless, was climbing a tree while James shouted encouragement from below. Little Margaret, 5 years old with her mother's auburn hair and her father's gray eyes, was playing with a doll in the grass. "Look at them," Delilah said softly. "Look at what we built, Nathan." "A family, a real family." "I know," Nathan said, feeling his throat tighten with emotion. "Sometimes I still cannot believe this is my life, that you are my wife, that those are my children. It feels like a dream I am going to wake up from." "It is not a dream," Delilah assured him. "It is real, and it is ours, and we earned it. Every moment of happiness, every child's laugh, every day of peace, we earned it, Nathan, by being brave enough to fight for it." Nathan pulled her close and kissed the top of her head. "You are right. We did earn it. And I thank God every day that you stepped off that stagecoach in Greeley 13 years ago, that you trusted me enough to accept my help, that you loved me enough to build this life with me." "I should be thanking you," Delilah said. "You saved my life that day, Nathan, mine and Samuel's. Everything good that has happened since then, all of this, is because you were willing to take a chance on a desperate woman with a baby and no husband." And by sundown that same day, I had claimed that baby as mine, Nathan remembered. Best decision I ever made. Samuel chose that moment to successfully rope the fence post, and his brothers and sisters cheered. The boy looked over at Nathan with a huge grin, and Nathan felt his heart swell with pride. That was his son. They all were his children. And this woman beside him was his wife, his partner, his everything. "Come on," Delilah said, standing and pulling Nathan to his feet. "Let us go join our children. They grow up so fast, and I want to soak up every moment while they are still young enough to want us around." Nathan laughed and followed her into the yard. Samuel immediately challenged him to a roping contest, which Nathan accepted, knowing full well that he was going to let his son win. The other children gathered around to watch and cheer, and Delilah stood to the side with Margaret on her hip, smiling at her chaotic, loud, perfect family. As the stars began to come out and the evening air grew cool, they all trooped inside for dinner. The children chattered about their day while Delilah served the meal she had prepared. Nathan sat at the head of the table, looking around at the faces he loved most in the world, and felt a peace so complete that he could barely contain it. This was what he had been fighting for all those years ago when he had stood in the dusty street of Greeley and offered a hand to a desperate stranger. This family, this home, this life, it had all been worth it. Every risk, every lie, every moment of fear and uncertainty had been worth it to arrive at this moment, surrounded by love and laughter and the knowledge that he was exactly where he belonged. After dinner, Nathan helped tuck the children into bed, a nightly ritual he cherished. He listened to Samuel's stories about school and his dreams of maybe going to college one day. He admired the picture Sarah had drawn of the family's horses. He broke up a wrestling match between the twins and got them settled in their shared bed. And finally, he rocked little Margaret to sleep while singing the same lullaby his mother had sung to him when he was small. When all the children were finally asleep, Nathan returned to the bedroom he shared with Delilah. She was already in her nightgown, brushing out her long auburn hair by lamplight, and Nathan stopped in the doorway just to look at her. After all these years, she still took his breath away. "What are you thinking about?" Delilah asked, catching his eye in the mirror. "How lucky I am," Nathan said simply. "How every day I wake up afraid I am going to discover this has all been a dream." Delilah set down her brush and turned to face him. "It is not a dream, Nathan. This is our life, the one we built together, and it is just going to keep getting better." Nathan crossed the room and took her in his arms. "I love you, Delilah Miller, more today than yesterday and not as much as I will tomorrow." "I love you too," Delilah said, standing on her toes to kiss him. "My cowboy, my hero, my husband." They climbed into bed together, and Nathan pulled Delilah close against his side, her head resting on his shoulder the way it had every night for the past 13 years. Outside, the ranch was quiet except for the sounds of cattle lowing in the distance, and the river flowing steadily toward some distant ocean. Nathan lay there in the darkness, listening to Delilah's breathing slow as she drifted off to sleep, and thought about how one moment of compassion, one decision to help a stranger, had changed his entire life. He had given Delilah and Samuel a home that day in Greeley, but they had given him something far more valuable in return. They had given him a family, a purpose, a reason to be better than he had ever thought he could be. He had claimed Samuel as his son by sundown on that fateful day, never realizing that in doing so, he was claiming his own future, his own happiness, his own chance at a love that would last a lifetime. As Nathan finally felt sleep pulling him under, his last conscious thought was one of profound gratitude. For Delilah, for Samuel, for all their children, for the ranch, for the life they had built together. It had started with a woman arriving in town with a baby and no husband, and it had become a love story for the ages, written in the wild and beautiful landscape of Colorado, sealed with vows spoken in truth and commitment, and lived out in the everyday moments of family life. And Nathan Miller would not trade a single second of it for anything in the world. The end.